Okay, so in this video, we're actually going to walk through how can we clean up the web part code to where we can actually separate and the different pieces of logic into different modules. So what I have here, as you can see, I've been playing around with this quite a bit since the last video, creating different web parts. I actually try to create a new web part every week or every 4 to 5 days or so, just to reinforce the process and the steps of creating web parts. So the first thing we want to do, let's go ahead and actually update our generator. And what we're going to do, I did a Google search on SharePoint Framework GitHub, and once you click into that, it actually gives you the latest and greatest as far as drops and updates that have been made. There has been a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there has been some significant updates. One was the update to the main module reference, and then the other one was update to TypeScript. So if you go into drop 6, you can at your leisure take a look at those release notes. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go into the release notes only because I want to highlight the NuGet package manager, or the node package manager, sorry. What's needed to update the generator, which is this guy here. So I'm going to just copy this, go into my command line prompt, make sure I'm clear. And what this is going to do, this is going to update the generator to the latest version, the SharePoint generator to the latest version, and it's going to do that globally. So any project that we create after this update is going to get the latest and greatest. If you look at this, the other items in the release notes, it's going to highlight the other changes you need to do if you want to bring up your current project or an existing project up to date. And because we're going to move things around a bit, and this is just a sneak preview, because we're going to move things around a bit, we're actually going to create a brand new project. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have all of my stuff in this code SPFx directory. So what I want to do is actually go in here and create a new project. So let me navigate to that section, SPFx. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just do an MD make new directory, and I'm going to call this one Deshaun DEC for December. And then I'm going to change into that directory. Oops. What was it? Deshaun DEC, not DC. Okay, so now that I'm here, this is going to be now this Yeoman generator at Microsoft/SharePoint. This is going to have the latest and greatest bits based on that last drop, which is in this case drop 6. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this. And that should go off. Uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, I didn't spell Microsoft correctly. Okay. Now this guy should go out there and start building out this new project structure. I'm not going to use this time to talk about the changes. Okay, let's see. What is your solution name? Let's go ahead and keep it Deshaun DC. Use the current folder. And we want to call this web part Deshaun DEC with that capping and spacing. This is the new drop 6 web part for the demo. Let's do that. And then we're still going to stick with the no JavaScript web framework. I was hoping by now I would be in React or possibly Knockout, but I think I'm holding off until Angular 2.0 or Angular 2 is released as a framework option. And I believe there is already a sample web part out there that's using Angular 2. And I may go ahead and take a look at that. But right now, let's just go ahead and use the no JavaScript framework, because I think in the end, this gives you a lot of what's going on under the covers. And I think the exercise that we're going to walk through today is going to be essential as far as what if we were going to create separate modules and then kind of bring those in and interact within those modules, or interact with those modules within the web part module. And the goal is to separate a lot of that HTML that's part of the web part, separate the business logic as far as getter or setting like business logic to get like lists and sites and users and all this other good stuff that you may come up with, and obviously you may come up with different names, something similar like get important libraries, right? And there is business logic on how to determine a quote unquote important library versus an out of the box library or something along those lines. So, we want a layer to grab that business logic. I don't really see a need to create a data service layer. And this is kind of like the traditional 3-tier type application, which may be totally wrong for this type of development. But, normally we would have like a presentation of business layer, then a data access layer. I think the data access layer is kind of a given, just given that REST API and all this other good stuff. So I didn't really find a good need to separate that. And then, still just yapping while this thing is loading. And then what we want to do is really create a separate module to hold all of our models, with the understanding that, anytime that we make an AJAX call, the JSON that gets returned, you want to hydrate that inside of a model, and then use that, either be an interface or a class, and then kind of use that to interact with that class of data throughout your project. So this should be wrapping up here if I timed it right. Still working. I don't see red, I see purple, so hopefully purple is good. Still going. So outside of that, so we want to get going on this piece here. Oh, okay, there it is. So let's do a code.space period, and this is going to pop open Visual Studio Code, which I have running in a different window. Okay, and now, so we go into the source directory, and then we go into the Sean deck web parts. This is the main web part module, so this is pretty much the same. For some odd reason, I think this file structure seems to be a little bit cleaner. I didn't really go through and compare like an older web part project to really understand like what the differences are, but this definitely seems to be a lot smaller than the previous projects. And then if you go into the web part module itself, this right here I think was a major change. That, this used to say preview. It used to be a reference to like SP web part preview or SP preview web part or something along those lines. And now this seems like this is going to be primed for a general release or something along those lines. So basically, looking at this project, hold on, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit, because I noticed like some of these videos, if you're looking at them on a mobile device, it can be kind of hard to view. So we want to make sure that these videos are mobile friendly. So so basically what we want to do, we want to separate this HTML and we want to separate this business logic. So in the two layers that I came up with was what do we call it? View. So it's a view module that's going to hold like all the HTML and say, okay, if you want to render something like, if you want to render this list collection in UL and LI list form or a list of divs, this view module would be responsible for that. And then we're going to have a repository. I still haven't came up with a good name for it, our manager or something along those lines, and basically use that layer to get all your business logic. So it knows nothing about the view, which kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility that if you're making UI only changes, hopefully we can limit those to 1 or 2 modules at the most. If you're making business or logic changes, limit that to a single module, because it's responsible for getting the data and certain filters and properties and other business logic if you have to join multiple REST API calls or what have you. And then we're going to have a models module, which pretty much is going to handle like all of our interfaces that we use to help hold the data. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's start off with creating our view module. And I'm going to just call this the Sean deck module view.ts. Actually, let me make this plural. So let's call it views. And then basically up here, we're just going to do an export and actually interface. And then just call this guy ilist. Now before we had iList, we just had a title and the ID. And if you recall from the previous video, basically this is just needed to hold in the JSON that's returned when you're going to get list or libraries for a particular site. Okay, so that's all set up. Now let's do a, no, I'm sorry. This should have been, this is for modules. So actually, you know what, let me just rename this. This is for models. Got ahead of myself. Okay, so that's renamed to models. Now what I want to do is go in here and create a new one. Now this is going to be for the view. And the view is supposed to have only the HTML dot views dot ts. Okay. Now actually another thing I want to do with this naming convention, I want to prefix these so that way they're kind of grouped, and then all the modules that I'm custom creating for this project are separate from the modules that I get with the project template. So what I want to do is just put a prefix DD in front of my custom names, and this is just me being picky, but based on the name, because this is sorted by name, it seems like sorted by alpha on the name, this is going to keep all my custom modules grouped because they all have the prefix DD. So this is going to be my views, and then basically here I'm going to come in here and do an export class, and then let's just call this DD view. Yeah, maybe plural, singular, I don't know. So let's just do DD view and just go ahead and create that class. And basically all we want, let me create a private member. Let's just call this HTML, and we're just going to set this to like hello world and wrap it in h1 tags. A h1 tag, and then we just say hello world. Okay. And then we have a public method that would just return this. And let's call this get default HTML. Get default HTML. Right? And then the return type would be a string, since it's going to return a string. And then we're just going to return that private member. Okay. So now we're good to go. So basically, we're just going to call this, and it's going to return a private member. And this is just going to be, we're just stubbing this out, and we want to make sure all of our layers are right. So we're not going to put a lot of complex logic in here as of yet. Keep it simple. So now when we go to the web part, we're still having risk. We're still having that issue, right, where sometimes it takes a while for that SCSS module to load. This is going to be the raw CSS definitions, but then there should be a module that's created behind the scenes to represent each one of these guys. So we're still waiting on that. That's why we're getting that red squiggly. That's nothing we can do. I think that's just a delay in the project build process, which is interesting. So let's go ahead and do an import. So first thing we want to do is let's import our view. And so what I'm going to do an empty curly brace here from, and then we're just going to make a reference to that module that we created. So this is going to be a dot / and then Deshaun deck, what do we call it, dot module dot dd views, right? And you omit the ts. Now based off of this could have multiple, so I can do a control space bar and it shows me the ones that are available, which we only have one defined class there, and that's just going to be dd view. So now I can come in here to the render method and replace this guy, which is the main intent, because as these guys get more complex, these web parts get a little bit more complex, to separate the views from the business logic from the models only makes sense, and then just kind of use like this main web part module as your controller, the one that just kind of orchestrates and put it all together. So now what we can do, we can make a reference to the dd view and then do a dot, and then it should have a get. Oh, you know what? My method is not here because I did not make it a static method. So let's go into the views. Let's just make this static with the keyword static. All right, so this is going to get default view. Then it's going to be, oh, now it's saying that, hey, you can only return static members. There we go. So it seems like static adheres to the same rules that we're used to in C#. So now let's go to the web part here. Let's do a dot and get default HTML. Right now there's 0 parameters. And then let's just save this out. So let's save this and let's go into a gulp serve and let's just make sure so far we did not break anything. So now this is gonna launch up in the gulp serve. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, so this is my local host workbench. Here's my web part. So I click into that and I'm getting a hello world, which is nice. I'm not getting the blue pane or all this other stuff that we're used to by default because we commented out that section of the HTML. So this is all. So we're doing away with this and we're controlling this HTML right from the get. So this is good. So now let's make this a little bit more interesting. So that we have a hello world, so I know we're wired up good there. Now let's add in, let's do the complex piece. And I think the most complex piece is to build in the comment or the repository module. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to new file, follow the same naming convention. Deshaun deck module.dd. Let's just call this repo.ts. And then in the repo, we're going to do export class and dd repo, almost like a static class, right? And then here we're just going to do public. Let's follow the same model that we did before, where we were just displaying the list and libraries for a particular site. So let's do a get list and 0 parameters for now, and actually no return type for now. And we're actually going to keep changing this. We're going to keep updating this, but let's just go ahead and get this wired up. And now let's make a reference to this in the web part, following the same format. So actually, let's just do a copy and paste, save on somebody typing. And so instead of dd views, this is going to be dd repo. And then let's erase this guy, dd repo, bring that guy in. So now we can come up here and do a dd repo. Did I forget my static classes and everything? No, this is not right. There we go. So now if I do a dd repo dot, yep, I forgot my static class. I mean my static method. Save that off, come here, get list. Okay, so this is more of a synchronous type call, but we want to make this asynchronous because we're going to start calling REST APIs. So basically, we want all of our REST API, getter, setter, all that type of functionality to be in the repository, and that's where all of our business logic is going to be. And we're separating that from the view. So if we need to make HTML changes, that should be here. If we need to make business logic changes, that should be here. So let's go ahead and build this out. So the first thing we have to do in order to make a REST API call, we have to give a handle to that HTTP client object, right? So let's do that. And I know this just from playing around with this. Actually, I built this like 4 times prior to this video, only because some of the logic was syntax really was very trying to understand. So what I want to do now, let's just do an import. And the guy that we need to bring in is this same reference, this iWebPart context that's referenced here in the main web part module. So let me do this. Let me just copy this guy, go to the repo, paste this in, and then let's get rid of the things that we're not using. So we're not going to use the web part properties. We're not going to use the iProperty pane settings, and we're not going to use the base client web part. All we need is this iWebPart context. So now what we can do for our local method is say, okay, let's get list, pass in the context from the web part. So that's just going to be type iWebPart context. And then also you want to pass in the URL. So this will be the URL of the web that you want to pull the data from. And now what we can do, I'm going to leave this void, but actually we want to return a type. So let's build this out. Let's do a C context, client context dot HTTP client. Now there's a basic HTTP client, and then there's the HTTP client. Now I think the basic one is not going to have the authentication, the O365 auth token for the current user. But the HTTP client, this guy is the one that does have that. And then we do a .get. So this is, so you can do get, post, or batch, or whatever you want. But in our case, we just need to get, and this is going to be the URL that's passed in. And then we need to append that URL because it's just going to be the URL to the web. So we need to append that URL with the API call, which is just this guy here in case of lists, right? And then we do the then, and I'm actually pretty proud of myself for remembering all this. So we do a then, and then basically this is going to be the response. So you have to define this, and this is going to be response type. Uh-oh. Yeah, the response type here. Oh, and I need, this is weird. See, this syntax right here is really weird. So basically it looks like you're doing like a delegate, and then there's a curly brace, and then there's a closing parenthesis, and then all your details go inside this curly brace here. And then basically you do a response dot JSON, right? And this is the one that hydrates. So you're going to get the JSON from that API call. And this method here is the one that does all the magic that maps that JSON to your interface. And right now we're not defining that because we have this all void. So let's do Shift-Alt-F to format. And then just let this kind of marinate for a little bit. Wow, I am so proud of myself for remembering this syntax. And this is crazy. But this comes with practice. I mean, I literally banged my head up against the wall. Well, not literally, but you know, it was just brain wrecking to try to get all this syntax right, the curly braces, and to get used to that. And when you will see another time where we have to do something very similar to this pattern when we actually call this property, this method, because it is an AJAX call, so you have to wait until that promise gets hydrated before you actually start to execute some stuff. So it's not a thread blocking call. So, you know, it does AJAX send you that promise so it can keep going through the process. But once your promise object gets hydrated, then and only then can you actually start to build logic. In our case, then and only then can we actually start to iterate through that collection of objects and start spitting out the HTML. So we're going to kind of get through that. So I think this is good. This is good. I mean, we're a lot of flexibility, a lot of reusability here. You know, we're telling the web part to pass in the context, which kind of give us access to this guy, which is important because that's going to be laced with the authentication that's needed in order to make this call to be valid, or else you would get like a 403 or 500 or whatever error they throw when you try to make this call as a anonymous user versus authenticated user. And then right now the void is only because we still need to build our models out. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to the models, and let's do an export here. And then instead of a class, we're going to do an interface, right? Because this is really just a holder of data. And then we do, wait, I thought we, for some odd reason, I thought we already did that. Or maybe I didn't paste it in. Okay. So we're going to build this interface, and then this is kind of weird, right? So this part here is straightforward. It says, okay, any property you want to bring back from that JSON, you got to represent it here. And we're going to start off with title and ID, right? But this next one is kind of interesting because this is the export interface, and this is plural, right? So this is like the collection. And this has a key property, a keyword property value, and then you return it an array of the type that you want that. And you know, I kind of compare it to a generic collection in C# right? So, you know, where you want to type it for that generic collection. In this case, it's going to be an array of list objects or interfaces. So, and I just picked this up from the tutorial, and I sort of kind of feel a little bit comfortable on why we need this format. And that's because, let me just save this all and go back to our repo. So this return type should be a promise, right? And then within here, you specify the iList type, iList plural type. And I think if you create it like this, then this JSON does some magic with, I guess it looks for a property called value, and then based on that value property type, which in our case is going to be iList, that's how we define it in the interface, it goes through and then figure out what properties and then try to map that up to the JSON. So that's how that's working. So anytime that, so really, you really only need this here, right? This type of, that interface with the value property, you only need that to satisfy this requirement here. Now, once you get past this, everything else is just using that iList interface, which is really cool. So it seems like there's only a single purpose for this, as of all I know now. There may be other scenarios of where you kind of need that, but it's only a single purpose for that iList, and it's only for this mapping to happen for free, and you don't have to explicitly do that. So we get a reg squiggly because now it's expecting the return type. We don't have the keyword return. And this is interesting because you have to do the return twice. Oh, you know what? This first one is not in the right spot. So you have to do the return twice. And I suspect this is, the first one is for the promise, and the second one is when the promise actually gets hydrated. And now it's crying because it says, hey, you're referencing an interface that you did not import. So let's go ahead and do that. It's going to import this from our models. Dot forward. Now this is going to be the Sean deck module dot dd models. Right, and no TC, no TS. All right. And then we have to tell it which one of these guys we want. So if I do a control space bar, I was like, that was more than I was expecting. I misspelled. I did a typo on models. All right. So now if I do a control space bar, it gives me the available interfaces that are defined in that module. And the only one I need is the plural one, the generic collection one. Which is interesting because I thought I would have to bring in both in order for this to render or to satisfy that mapping correctly, but it doesn't seem like it's required because I only brought in one. I said, well, if it breaks, I kind of know where to go back and fix it. So you only need the collection one and not the individual item or list iList singular. So let's go ahead and save this off. Let's go back into our web part. And now we should be able to use this guy. So we're going to reg squiggly here because we redefined that method. We put on a iWebPart context, so we have to pass it to context. So that's going to be this page, this context, right? Yeah. So that's going to be that guy. And then we need to pass in the URL. So as of right now, we're going to do the current web. So context, page context, web, absolute URL. So we're going to pass that guy in. And obviously, once we build this all the way out, instead of defaulting this to or hard coding this to be the current web, we can wire up a web part property and have the user specify the URL. So we're making this call. Now it's an AJAX call because we wired up the promise return type. So now what we have to do, we have to do the then, and let's format this in the same pattern. We do a then we do a, I'm gonna call this data, only because this is a little bit different, right? So we're not defining this parameter type. We're passing it in almost like like an out in C#. where you pass in a data parameter, but it's supposed to, you're expecting it to hold the response back. I think that's the right thought process behind that. So I'm gonna do make this a delegate with the equal, greater than, and then parenthesis. Then I'm gonna close out that second. I'm sorry, with the curly brace, and I'm gonna close out that second parenthesis. And then here now I can do a data dot value, and this is going to be my, as is indicated here, this is going to be my iList array. Even though it sits in this generic collection, we're only going after the value here, the property, and that's how we defined it, right? We defined it as to be an iList array. So this is going to be my iList array. And now what we want to do, let's just do a length, right? And let's just spit out the count for this. So in order to see this, we have to do a this dot DOM element. This is all on the web part itself, right? So enter HTML. Now I want to do a plus equal just in case there's other HTML in there. I don't want to replace it. I just want to append to it. And now let's just do a div tag to kind of hold all this, hold the count. And then this is just going to be this guy here. So let's just bring this guy up. Exit out and plus here. All right, and we can do something like count is. All right. Now this is interesting. The way this is, let me put this semicolon. The way this is wired up, because we have this guy. Uh-oh, Deshaun, you're erasing stuff. We have this guy. This is our AJAX call, and then this is going to be our synchronous call. This is our hello world. And this is just something that we're hard coding in, right? Or just explicitly stating to get the count. Now, when we save this, the expectation, because of the timing of this, you're actually going to see this first, and then you're going to see this later. Only because this is synchronous, there's no delay in the calling, right? It's not AJAX. There's nothing to wait on. So it's going to say, hey, I have this HTML. I'm going to go ahead and spit it out. Oh. Glad we talked through that, because you have to do a plus equals, or else it's going to have this HTML and you may or may not see this. I'm not sure how that equal will work. So this is going to get fired first because it doesn't need to wait. There's no delay. And then this is going to come in second because it's waiting for your AJAX call to hydrate the promise. So let's save this. Let's go back to our guy here. This is our local, because we're making REST API calls, as we mentioned several times in the previous videos. This REST API is not going to happen on the local workbench. So what we have to do is go to an O365 tenant, which is my guy here. And let's bring in Deshaun Deck as hello world, and then there is our count, right? Even though, as I mentioned before, even though from a sequence, from a coding standpoint, we have hello world coming in second, it appears first because this guy has the delay. Okay, so this is working out great. So we have a count, so we know there's list data. Now let's go ahead and expand this out. So right now we have our default HTML, and what we can do now, we can go in here and say, you know what, we want the DD view to actually iterate through our list collection. So let's go ahead and define that in the views module. And basically, let me just copy this guy. We'll keep our default HTML, and let's rename this guy to get list HTML. I'm sure you come up with better names over time. This is still going to spit out a string, because basically what we're going to have it do is say, hey, you give me, I'm the view, so I'm going to control based on any collection that you pass in. Well, we negotiate the type, because it's going to be iList array. Based on the collection that you pass in for this particular method to display the HTML for the list, I'm going to expect a list HTML, a list collection, and then based off of that, I'm going to render what that HTML should look like. So we want to bring in the collection, and we need to type it iList. Oh, you know what? Let's bring in our model. So we do our import from, and then this guy is going to be .forward Deshaun deck module DD, what do we call it, models. And then we want to bring in, we need a singular, right? The iList. So it's going to be an array of these, but we only need this singular type. Cool. So now that we have a collection coming in, this view is only responsible for taking that collection, and then we can do a for each, and then here's that weird syntax again. Let's just call it item. Give it a type iList. Oh, you need double parenthesis. Double parenthesis, delicate, curly brace, close parenthesis, and then put our loop information here. So let's have this guy all dump into a local variable. We just call this HTML. We set it to an empty string initially, and then just take that HTML, do a plus equals, right? Because this is a collection. And then what should we do here? Let's do LIs. Actually, I'm going to do single quotes, and there's a reason for that. So let's do LI, right? And then let's just bring in that information, which is just item, and let's just do the title for now. Okay. So now, before this return type, we copy this in. So this should be the local HTML. And because we're using LIs, we need to wrap this guy with the UL to make it proper HTML tagging. So let's do HTML equals UL, close the UL. HTML, right? And do Shift-Alt-F for formatting. Okay. I think this looks right. And then we save this all and go back to our web part. And now instead of just doing a simple count or the size of the array, let's actually display the details of the list collected. So I'm still doing this inner HTML plus equals. Let's keep the count here. That's fine. Let's keep the div here as well. And then let's do, let's see here. Let's do, sorry. Lost my train of thought. Oh, let's do a ddview.get list HTML, right? And then it's expecting that collection. So this is going to be our data that's return dot value, right? And then we're just going to go ahead and punch that guy in right between that div tag. Let's save this off. Let's see what happens. All right, so because this is the tenant, we have to explicitly do a refresh. Awesome. I'd just be so surprised when this thing works on the first time, right? It's like, you know, I went through all these steps, and that's why I'm very cautious with, okay, let's do this chunk, you know, go serve, you know, refresh, make sure it's working. Okay, let's do this chunk, go, only because, I mean, the TypeScript and all this other stuff is nice, but I mean, without like true debugging and all this other good stuff, if you do too much without just, you know, doing it in chunks and small modules and testing and confirming along the way, I think you can get a huge mess on your hands. Yeah, but here we go. I mean, this is pretty sweet. So we got 23. Oh, we did unordered list. Let's just change that to make sure we got 23 return. So now if I want to go to change the HTML, and that's why this model is ideal for me, because now if I just want to change something in the presentation or formatting, I'm just mocking with the view module and not trying to chase down, you know, in the web part module, my mix and match of, oh, these methods are view related, these methods are business logic related, and oh yeah, I'm defining these modules and all this other good stuff within the web part module. You're kind of separating these out, and it's just a lot easier to work with. All right, so let's go here and hit refresh. All right, so I have an ordered list, and I do have 23 as my array size indicates. Okay. So let's do this. Let's take this title. Let's put the GUID or the ID in parentheses, and then on the new line for each and every list and library, let's display the description. So the first thing we want to do is, okay, we want to add additional information to display. You just go into the view. Your logic remains the same. Your business logic to grab the list, that's not changing. You just adding more information to the presentation. And so now if I go here in parentheses right behind the title, let's put a space between it. I'm gonna just use item.id, save that off, come back to my web part, hit refresh. Boom. So now my GUID is right there to the right. So now if I want to add description, let's say here we want to do a line break, and then let's add description here, item dot. So we only have ID and title. So in order to update, to get additional information from our JSON, we know that property is being returned because we didn't filter it out. So to get additional information in my JSON, I just need to go to my model and say, throw a description in there as well. And then hit save. So now if I go back to my view, hit dot, there's my description. That's going to give a break, hit save, hit refresh. Boom. So there's my description. Kind of hard to see because it's kind of, we don't have a lot of space in there to distinguish it. So I haven't tried this before, so I'm gonna go out on the demo limb here and do a class. Oh, never mind. I'm not gonna do that. I was gonna do a class.styles and then whatever. You know what? Let's try it. So let's do, and this is why I use single quotes to concatenate the string. So that way I can reserve my double quotes for proper HTML attribute lacing, right? So now let me do this. Let me do styles. Oh no. So the double quotes is for the class attribute. The single quote is for stringing. So let me do styles. And this guy is going to say, I don't know what you're talking about because we don't have our styles reference in the module, in the models module. So let's go and just copy this guy here. So if I'm importing it there, I want to import it here as well. Wait, no, model, no, views, sorry. So I want to import it here as well. So now I should have full access to, no, I'm sorry, I brought in the wrong thing. That's my locale stuff for my strings. This is my styling guy here. Okay, so now I have styles, and I didn't really define anything here. Let's do list item. I'm not sure what this is going to do. Let's take a look and see what list item looks like. So list item is going to give us a max. It's going to set a margin, and then it's going to do a box shadow. Okay, yeah, let's go with that. It may look okay. Let's see. All right. So we go into our views. Now we want to say, okay, for every line item, let's do, for every list item, let's use that style. Let's go back here, hit refresh. Not much of a change, huh? Did it take? Let me say the inspect. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it's there. It's just didn't do anything. All right, let's go. Let's see if we can define this better. I don't want to do a max width. I want that to expand all the way out. Top margin. Right is auto. Bottom. You know what? Let's just do like a 20. Let's do something more aggressive. Hit refresh. Ugh. Alright, maybe I'm not lined up correctly. Okay. That's margin. Yeah, maybe I'm not. That's interesting though. Let's do padding bottom. And let's just 40 pixels just to make sure we get a really good change here. Nope. So it seems like it's not responding. I think that's definitely a lot of space between them. And yeah, it's not even represented there. You know, I wonder if there's something additional that's needed in order for this to be valid. Interesting. Okay. So let's just do this. Let's just add in another break since our styles approach did not work. Let's just add this towards the end of the closing li tag. I'm gonna have to play around with that. I wonder if we have to pass in, instead of making a reference, yeah, that works. So instead of making a reference, and that may kill this model, if you have to pass in the styles for each and every method. Oh, that would suck. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into why this is not working. I'm not sure why this is not working. It's being wired up, right? So I mean, these guys are responding. It's just that they are not. Oh, wait. I think this is the way this is wired up. Is this expecting a parent class? Yeah, I think this is expecting Deshaun deck. So let's do this. So in the Outlook container, I think it's expecting Deshaun deck in order to respond for those styles and for those CSS classes to be valid, or the selected to be valid. So let's try this. Let's do. Let's put Deshaun deck here. And now I'm gonna have to use single quotes here and then double quotes because I didn't follow the pattern. So let's do styles and then Deshaun. Yep. Alright, so this is going to set that class on the container, and then hopefully these list items definitions should kick in. Let's see what happens. There we go. That's what it was. So I wasn't following the proper selector in which it was defined. I just remember that because, let me see. I remember when we were playing around with the styles prior to that, I noticed that those definitions were being nested into like an outer definition. All right, cool. Well, I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, because I think that would have stunk if you could only play around with styles if you passed it in from the web part. So I'm glad that even in our view module, we can make a direct reference to that styles module and take advantage of those CSS classes. All right, so that's that. So next, in the next video, this one's kind of, this one's running a little bit longer. So in the next video, what we can do is actually come back into our web part instead of this guy being hard-coded. Let's use web part properties and let the user specify, like we did before in the prior video, allow the user to specify the URL as well as the count, and then just pass it in. But as you can see here, this becomes very, very simplistic, right? As far as, hold on, let me see, Shift-Alt-F. Well, that didn't clean up at all. But, as far as, rendering it, this is our main guy here. This is our properties, we can collapse that. So, this web part that's, getting data and displaying that and defining HTML and all this other good stuff is now it's narrowed down to this many lines of code in the web part itself, keeping that clean, and then, breaking things up like all your models as you move forward, right, you start getting back list item and dealing with custom site columns and all this other good stuff, you know, you can define all that stuff here, keep it separate. This is the responsibility of this module. And then in the repo, this can be all your business stuff, your business logic, right? So if you say get configuration, and maybe you have a, you know, a config file at the root site collection within the root web at a certain name, you know, you can go after that information and define all that business logic on how to grab that in one spot and not dirty up your web part for that. And then in the views, this is where all your HTML goes. I think 75% of all changes are going to be HTML or UI related, but the logic behind the scene remains the same. Maybe you're showing additional information, and if you're lucky, all that is in, you know, the JSON to where you don't have to do additional AJAX calls and all this other good stuff to get it. So, you know, if that's the case, you know, it becomes pretty straightforward. You know, you just you manipulate HTML and all this other good stuff, and you know, loops and properties and all that good jazz. So, you know, your core business logic remains intact. You don't have to adjust that or modify that. So very, very cool. So that's it for this video. Like I said, I think in the next video what we'll do is expand this out a little bit, you know, interacting with web part properties, and then possibly adding, you know, additional more styling to it. Okay, I'll catch you in the next video. Take